commonly known as ISSI, is to conduct focused research analytical studies on multidimensional aspects of India and promotes policy discourse on India's foreign security and socio-economic policies, along with implication Pakistan and the region as well India-Pakistan relations. When we talk about Pakistan-India relations, Kashmir cannot be ignored. Therefore, the center will focus on Kashmir because monitoring developments related to India's regional and global policies, contribution to the existing body of knowledge through evidence-based input to the relevant stakeholders will also be the hallmark of this at this end in generating an informed debate on issues concerning India. Ladies and gentlemen, I conclude with the famous quote by the Sun Tzu, which he has mentioned in his popular book, The Art of War. I quote, "If you know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. If you know yourself, but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. If you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle." Unquote. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your patient hearing.
Thank you, Shahrukh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. What an honor it is to welcome Air Chief Marshal Suhail Aman to the inauguration of one of the most important 12 prowess. He has demonstrated in his long career in Pakistan Air Force all that he ever does. I share the privilege of having served with Suhail Aman in the same squadron, Alauddin Squadron, EPAF College Sargodha, for over 3 years together. And that is totally my own privilege, and which I cherish. He is also a very fine human being, an amiable personality. The role that he has played in uplifting the role of Pakistan Air Force in the defense of the nation is before everyone. In fact, we were just talking in my room about the role that Pakistan Air Force played in Zarb-e-Azb, which indeed was commendable. The way Pakistan Army, Pakistan Air Force and civilian authorities gelled together, and that harmony ensured that today terrorism is on the retreat in Pakistan. All advisories are being changed, and inshallah we have a bright future. So thank you very much, Chief Marshal, for your contribution to the nation. Now let me say a few words about the vision which is guiding us here at the Institute of Strategic Studies to Pakistan. We also carry out events to further our narratives, and then we also provide policy inputs to our stakeholders, primarily Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is our funder, which funds our entire programs. The focus that we are trying to bring to the Institute is with regard to 3 aspects. One is we want to build up the quality, enhance the quality of what we research on. There are several ways of doing that. One is to improve the research methodology, the other is to ensure there is no plagiarism. But one way which is most important is that whatever we research on is widely read everywhere. For that, we have enlisted our institute with over 7 indexing agencies in the United States and rest of the world. So now our articles are read and cited in US, and we get a feedback on that. So we are very pleased with that 1-year effort that we have made on improving the quality of our work and our reach out. The other is synergy. Because we get our themes mostly from Ministry of Foreign Affairs and other stakeholders, whatever we research on, we also want to make sure that the events that we organize, the roundtables, the conferences, the international events, those should be more or less on the similar themes, so that whatever we research on is then manifested in the policy discourse, and whatever we discuss in those events is then reflected into our research. So giving us this energy. The third element of our focus is narrative building. Actually, we are living in the age of narratives. Honestly, if you tell me that this is black, and if you constantly say this is white, many people will tend to believe that this is white. We don't want to say what is not correct, but we do want to clear misperceptions about Pakistan. And I think the institute, which is connected overtly with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, has this responsibility to magnify the national narratives. And we all, I'm sure you all share with me that our image is worse than our reality. So we need to really work on that, and this institute is totally committed to that as focus. So what do we do? What's our methodology? We have our own building. We have about 24, 25 research team. So we thought that we are already endowed with enough resources. We don't need more. So what we can do is that we can achieve more with less. So we came up with the concept of establishing centers of excellence within the institute from within existing resources. It's not that we are proliferating or we are expanding. No, it's that we are setting up centers. We have a functioning China Study Center, China-Pakistan Study Center, which is flourishing, I must say, and it has engaged in programs. Just to give you one example, that we were able to bring together 16 China study centers operating all over Pakistan here twice, and 10 Pakistan study centers in all across China here. So we were able to bring 20 professors of 20 leading universities from China, and then make them sit with the professors from Pakistan. So this is what we are doing in China Study Center, which, as you know, is our most important strategic and economic partner. The other one that we have recently created is ACDC, Arms Control and Disarmament Center. Again, who can disagree that for Pakistan nuclear capability, this nuclear deterrence that we have developed is the ultimate equalizer to the conventional asymmetry we have with India. Why with India? Because India is the only country from which we have suffered aggression at least 4 times. And therefore, it was extremely important. Every Pakistani actually feels honored and pleased that we have a nuclear capability which is defensive in nature. It's not offensive. It's defensive in nature, and we want to make sure that we must deter any future possible aggression against Pakistan. So we thought that this institute, which already was working on disarmament themes, must also play its part. So ACDC, which has a very vast advisory board, is working closely with SPD and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Disarmament Division, is now in full swing. In fact, one of the first events we are organizing is on emerging technologies and its impact on strategic stability. We're doing it in 2 parts. One impact of emerging technologies on strategic stability. The other is militarization of outer space. So that we'll do next month. This one is scheduled for this month. So that is the second center. The third center that we are inaugurating today is India Study Center. Why India Center and why not South Asia Study Center? Now, for as long as I can remember, all over Pakistan, the area study centers focused on South Asia. And not that South Asia is not important, not that all the relatively smaller nations are not important. There was a philosophy, because, and I have particularly seen it myself in the SAARC meetings, that these relatively smaller nations would band together to counterbalance India, not in a negative way, but in a positive sense, so that the big country would not become hegemonic in imposing its decisions. So there was a perfect good rationale for that. But I thought that in the process, we weren't really focusing enough on India. If you go to Jawaharlal Nehru University, you'll find many more PhDs on Pakistan alone than you would find in Pakistan doing PhDs on India. So I think there is enough to study on.
Studies Islamabad Ambassador Khalid Mahmood, Director General Ambassador Edaat Ahmed Chaudhry, ladies and gentlemen, it's an absolute pleasure and an honor to be among this highly informed gathering for the launch of India Study Center here at the Institute of Strategic Studies. I can see among the audience some of the foremost experts, scholars, and senior colleagues who have worked on India with great distinction and at some of the most critical feel rather intimidated to speak on India in the presence of these foremost experts on India. But let me begin by complimenting the Institute of Strategic Studies for this extremely valuable and timely initiative. The center, I am sure, will become premier research center on India and a great resource for all of those who are interested in better understanding India. Ladies and gentlemen, the relationship between India and Pakistan is one of the most important but also one of the most complex and complicated one. For the past 72 years, it has remained at the heart of our foreign policy discourse. Therefore, there has always been a need in the academic and policy circles to understand India, but this need has never been as acute as it is today. The Indian social, economic, and political landscape is undergoing a sea change under the current Indian leadership. The India of today is different from one known to most of us. New research is therefore needed to understand the new mindset, the new ideology, the new strategic thinking, and the new approach. We've been hearing that India is on the move. The journey is from incredible India to intolerant India, from the largest democracy to the largest theocracy, from secularism to Hindu Rashtra. All are palpable. India is indeed on the move, but this move is causing a lot of anxiety and pain in the civilized world of today. There is in fact a need to reassess the whole Indian construct and dictum. India has itself thrown its own narrative about the partition of the subcontinent and the two-nation theory out of the window. Some of the key questions the researchers are struggling with today are: is it Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi's India, or is it his assassin Nathuram Vinayak Godse's India? Is Gandhi still the national hero of India, or is it Godse? Who shot Gandhi in the chest 3 times from point blank distance? The new national protagonists, such as Godse, they are unfortunately becoming the national heroes of a country that we have to live with. And even more importantly, is it still India, or has it already become Hindustan? Ladies and gentlemen, neither the pace nor the direction of India's shift is rational. So there is no way for Pakistan or any other rational country to engage with India in a rational manner. But unfortunately, Pakistan does not have the luxury to either disengage itself from India and overlook its rapid regression. I am sure the center will also find it useful to study the Indian propaganda machine to better understand as to how the perpetrator of state terrorism has been presenting itself as the victim of terrorism. It will also be useful for the center to study as to how India has misled the international community for so long on the issue of state or non-state actors, while itself using its own serving officers such as Commander Kulbhushan Yadav for terrorist activities in other countries. The center will also find it useful to decode Hindutva mindset and study the Chanakya doctrine to understand the fascist mindset that is at the heart of RSS BJP regime. The center's research might be helpful in making the world understand as to why Indian state-sponsored saffron terrorism is more dangerous than any other form of terrorism, and also why the extremist Hindutva ideology is more dangerous than any other form of extremism known to the world. Understanding the Hindutva ideology will lay bare the Indian hegemonic designs that are not only a threat to the region but also threatening the global peace. I'm sure the center will also be able to focus on the situation in Indian occupied Kashmir, the illegality of Indian actions of August 5, the digital holocaust resulting from more than 6 months long communication blockade and media blackout, the incarceration of entire Kashmiri leadership, the illegal detentions and forced disappearances of over 13,000 young Kashmiris, the presence of more than 900,000 occupation troops, making Indian occupied Kashmir the largest open prison in the world, and the talk of opening de-radicalization camps in an area which is already a prison. And also the study of draconian laws such as Armed Forces Special Powers Act and Public Safety Act, and how these laws are in contradiction with international laws and international norms. The South Asia Division in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs indeed looks forward to benefiting from the quality research the center will be doing on these and other important issues. Let me conclude, ladies and gentlemen, with the hope that the center will be able to establish close linkages with other academic institutions and think tanks, not only in Pakistan, but globally for joint research and mutually beneficial exchange of ideas. Ambassador Azad Ahmed Chaudhry spoke about an exhaustive list of the areas on which this newly established center will be working. But if the Director General allows me to make a wish, my wish would be a request for the center to study India's incurable obsession with Pakistan and also prescribe a remedy if there is one. I thank you very much all.
Chaudhary, Director Sahab, thank you for making me part of this new venture of India Center. When I joined academia, I discovered that academics exist at the periphery of Pakistani society. And if you are working on the domestic politics of India, you are on the periphery of the academics as well. So it's a long way to be here. Thank you very much. There generally exist two broad trends in academic life. One is an attitude of justification. We are expected to just ourselves from the official processes and condemn whatever they are doing. So the alternative is condemnationist. So if policy is successful, one party celebrates, and if it is a failure, we have told you. Somewhere in between these two justificationist and condemnationist processes, I think there is a lot of space to have serious academic work that can be beneficial to Pakistani state and society. Somewhere we both are wrong. We are so-called the Kitabi Kidas, and you are the actors on the ground, and we always think
Vice Chancellors, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. What a great pleasure and honestly an honor for me to be here this morning to attend the inaugural of India Study Center. while the scope has been defined by many, especially the DG, to my own mind, when I started to think about it, it encompasses a lot more. It will get into the policy formulation in almost every domain, starting from economics to foreign policy and others. But I'll talk about these a little later. First of all, my thanks to the chairman and the DG for having me here and having spoken such good words. Coming out to a few of the comments by the DG and the Vice Chancellor, and I see a beautiful construct out here. The policymakers actually do not have time. And the worst thing is they think that they know everything. And that is what leads, and that's not true for Pakistan, but that's what is true for a lot of other countries and even few of the leading democracies. That linkage is so critical and so important to be made where the academic research, going through a lot of data and everything, but then putting it up simply into the policy guidelines. And that connection where the such busy policy makers understand this. And that reminds me on the lighter side, when we were young and we were making presentations at the national level, or we were making the basic data and collecting like researchers, we were told to make presentations which were discernible and which were understood by a grade 10 student. And I used to wonder, and I would say, we are going at such a big level and talking about such major issues. Why is that advice made? And now I realize that that advice is particularly correct. When you go to the Harvard Kennedy and you go out to the other big institutions which are making policy recommendations, you'll be surprised that when the policy comes out for the policymakers, that's never over a leaf of paper. And that states everything from introduction to the policy guidelines and to possible outcomes. I personally think the Institute, and led by, I think, the chairman, of course, then director, DG, has huge task at their hand. I'll talk about just two important areas before I come to the India specific. 50 years down the line, when historians start to write what was the unipolar world all about, I think they'll not have a very pleasant story to tell. What happened to North Africa, what happened to Middle East, what happened to South Asia, what were the counter-terrorist efforts which went on and how many lives went in, what kind of money went in, and we all talk about this. But I think it's all happening when from a bipolar world we went to the unipolar world, and that is why very quickly the concept of unipolar world is now challenged, and we are talking of multiple centers of power coming out, whether it is Russia and China. I think that's an important factor to be remembered, because that's what is impacting the mind of India and the Hindutva and all those coming up. I think that's very important to remember. There's another important correlation which needs to be understood, and that's between the Jews and the Nazis relationship and Hindus and Hindutva. But the basic difference in the construct out here is, regardless of Janice's part, is that because of certain inevitable factors, United States had to put huge support out there, and that is why from nothing the Israel grows to what is grown out today. Under the same state of mind, from 1920s RSS, now today the world is challenged, and I'm not talking of the South Asia alone, to a mindset which thinks, being a democratic force, they think that they can push in the Hindus or the Hindutva as a strategy into going and taking actions. I think these are two very important factors, the international stage, the way it is moved, and what is the mindset out in India. On this center, my own, it will be an honor for me to come and discuss few of the areas which are important. The mindset at India at this time is nothing to really get worried about. That's my firm belief. On the leadership panel, we used to talk about the ability of leadership is converting challenges into opportunities. And I think that's a fantastic line. I mean, we in Pakistan have been having challenges one after another. Terrorism, a lot of people, honestly, even at this time, may not understand what was the magnitude and how our enemies collaborated together to put that challenge into us. God was very kind. There was complete synergy between not only the military, but the nation stood behind. And that is how we ended up defeating that challenge. And that is how there are time and again strategies coming up against Pakistan to put us one down. But then it is the ability to convert those challenges into opportunities is what we need to understand. So India is not an issue that we should, in any case, get pressurized or we should get even stressed about it. There are fault lines, and there are major fault lines which are there within the India in terms of separatist movements, in terms of what is happening in Kashmir, in terms of their services sector, looking at big losses on the economy. I think those are very important areas that we really need to understand and take care of. The last point that I would like to make here, and therefore the center to study, the term hybrid war, I have a difficulty with this term. We've been through the conventional wars, fine, but then we decided it's a nuclear deterrence which holds the war, and nuclear deterrence did serve a great purpose. Went to the brinks of war, came back, everybody understood this is not right to go. And I think lately what happened, India did try to find that space out there, but they understood that in case there's a political disconnect between your military ability and your political disconnect, you get failure on both sides. The military is unable to do a task, and I think they very quickly discovered, not only on the Air Force side, but they very quickly discovered there are major flaws despite the equipment that they have on their training. And that's what is something very important to understand. So from a conventional war to a nuclear deterrence, hybrid war is not the term that hybrid strategy is something that we may like to focus on. Because wars may not take place at that conventional domain, but then there are real-time opportunities and the strategies to be put into action to make sure that the other country is taken care of in that very manner. We are a peace-loving country and we understand all of us very well. But then when you have an enemy next door who wants to subjugate, wants to annex Kashmir with 370, and who wishes to dominate the region, and I think like the Ambassador Azaz was saying, that small countries will pull up and they're economically constrained. They need that big country's support, but I think for that to be harnessed, the hybrid strategy is something we need to understand very clearly. We need to understand the mindset, and the ground for the hybrid strategy is absolutely prepared. That is what we need to exploit and accentuate. And I'm sure this study center will do a lot of work into the hybrid strategy and work out very fine. We belong to a very proud nation. God has been very kind to our nation. We've gone through wars, we've gone through many challenging times, but we always looked at the horizon as a nation. It's a nation of very competent people. And I'm sure the destiny of this nation lies absolutely into the skies. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.